There was always something off about Maggie. For years, I felt like I was the only one who noticed. When we were kids, we spent a lot of time with our little cousins. Sometimes we'd all be at our house, other times at theirs. My mom and Aunt Linda would drink wine together, bonding over the fact that they'd both lost their husbands, my uncle had passed away, and my dad was in prison. Being the oldest, I usually hung around the younger kids. It wasn't because I liked babysitting, I just wanted to keep an eye on Maggie. If I left her alone with them, someone always ended up hurt. One time, she clipped a clothespin onto the family cat and just stood there, watching it dart around the room like it was the funniest thing in the world. She was 12. Another time, she dared one of our cousins to drop that same cat out of a third-floor window. She taunted him, calling him a coward until he gave in. "I can't believe you're actually scared," I heard her say. By the time I got there, it was too late. He'd let go of the cat. Thank God it was okay, but my cousin wasn't. He was traumatized, locked in his room, screaming and crying. Maggie, of course, played innocent, telling Mom she'd read in school that cats could survive falls like that. She even pretended to feel bad. It was all a load of crap. Maggie never felt sorry about anything. But Mom bought it every time because Maggie was her special little girl. After Dad went away, Grandpa Joe started coming over a lot to help out. He was Mom's dad. We didn't really know much about Dad's side of the family. Grandpa Joe was everything to me. He was the guy I looked up to the most. He always seemed happy, or at least he never let us see otherwise. He brought life back into our house, music, dancing, laughter. He taught me stuff my dad never did, like how to ride a bike or tie a tie. And when Mom wasn't around, he'd even show me how to use Dad's dusty old power tools in the basement. It didn't matter what we were doing, I just liked having him around. Every morning, he'd already be at the kitchen table when I got up, reading the paper. The second I walked in, he'd put it down and cook me breakfast. He loved watching me eat as much as he loved telling stories. One day, he gave me this small military medal and told me about how he'd almost died earning it. He said he wasn't much older than me at the time. I didn't feel right taking it, but he insisted, and when I pinned it to my backpack the next day, he was thrilled. "Now I can go with you, even when I'm in the ground," he said with a laugh. He joked, but he wasn't kidding. He knew I'd need his wisdom even after he was gone. Grandpa Joe was sharp like that. He saw what I saw, something was very wrong with Maggie. He also knew that when he wasn't around anymore, things would get a lot tougher for us. Maggie hated how close I was to Grandpa Joe. Whenever she saw us together, she'd scowl. The day he passed, she walked into my room with this weird glint in her eye and said, "Are you sad Grandpa's dead?" I lost it. I screamed at her and told Mom. Maggie played dumb, acting like she didn't know any better. Mom, deep in her grief, wasn't ready to deal with it. During the funeral, Maggie watched me like I was her personal entertainment. I tried so hard not to cry, just to deny her the satisfaction. It worked, she left me alone. But everyone else started asking my mom what was wrong with me. It drove me insane, seeing how people scrutinized me while Maggie went completely unnoticed. Losing Grandpa Joe hurt more than anything I'd ever experienced, and when his medal fell off my backpack the next week, I was crushed. I came home sobbing, and nothing Mom did could console me. Maggie just sat there, smirking. "Who's gonna look out for you now?" she asked. I shoved her, hard. Mom grounded me for it. That night, I lay in bed thinking about killing her. Maggie's influence on me went far beyond the things she said or did. It planted this constant doubt in my mind, a nagging sense that no one was ever genuine. I'd spent my life watching her pretend to be something she wasn't, and it made me question everyone else. Like, when a cashier asks how you're doing, and you ask them back, but neither of you actually cares. I started wondering if that's just how everyone is. So I kept to myself. I didn't trust people, and I didn't make many friends. By high school, Maggie's reign of terror was still in full swing. My freshman year was amazing, one whole year without her. But then, before I knew it, she was a freshman too. My peaceful days ended, and I was back to spending afternoons in the counselor's office. I never said much in those meetings. They treated me like any other anxious student, offering breaks and regular check-ins. I didn't know how to explain that I was terrified of my 14-year-old little sister, the sweet, innocent girl everyone else was just starting to know. It didn't take long for Maggie to adapt to high school. She slipped right into her usual routine, wearing her sweet girl mask while doing what she did best, hurting people and hiding the evidence. She was smarter about it now, way more calculated than when we were kids. Her stunts weren't as blatant anymore, they were subtle, designed to leave scars that only the victims would feel while everyone else overlooked them. She'd date boys, break their hearts, reel them back in, and dump them all over again, just because she could. To everyone else, it looked like normal teenage drama, but I knew better. Maggie thrived on it. She'd flirt just enough with male teachers to keep them uncomfortable, constantly belittle her best friend, and spread rumors about me being abusive. It made my blood boil. But I couldn't confront her, not directly. If I pushed, she'd push harder. So I stayed out of her way as much as I could, even though just thinking about her smug little grin made me see red. Then I met Ms. Carson, the new school counselor. "You're in here a lot," she said with a small smile. I wasn't exactly eager to open up at first, but there was something different about her. She didn't talk down to me or act like she had all the answers. She listened when I rambled and sat with me when I couldn't bring myself to say anything. It felt like the person she was in that office was the same person she was outside of it, and that meant more to me than she probably realized. Over time, I started to trust her. For the first time in years, I felt my guard coming down. So when Ms. Carson asked me one day what I was afraid of, it all came pouring out. Every last bit of it, Maggie, her manipulations, the fear I lived with every day. But then Ms. Carson decided to bring Maggie in for a meeting. "What the hell did you tell her?" Maggie hissed at me later, slamming my locker shut before I could respond. I couldn't even look at her. My 5-foot little sister, a freshman, had me frozen in fear. "Nothing," I muttered, pretending to rummage through my locker like I was looking for something important. I just hoped she'd get bored and walk away, or that someone else would come talk to us. But no one paid us any attention. To anyone passing by, it probably looked like a normal sibling conversation. Then, out of nowhere, she slammed the locker door onto my hand. The pain was instant and overwhelming. I yelled, loud enough to stop everyone in the hallway. Teachers ran out of their classrooms, and students crowded around, buzzing with confusion. The ones closest to me gasped, a few even crying out for help. I sank to the floor, cradling my hand against my chest, terrified to even look at it. By the time anyone realized what had happened, Maggie was gone. I was lucky, it was just a bad bruise. It hurt to make a fist, but it wasn't anything permanent. Maggie got into trouble, of course, with both the school and Mom. But what seemed to bother her the most was how her carefully constructed image was starting to crack. People were noticing things about her they hadn't before, things she didn't want anyone to see. Some upperclassmen nicknamed her Little Ginger Snap, and it spread like wildfire. She hated it. Ms. Carson wasn't letting up either. She insisted on regular meetings with Maggie, and for the first time, Maggie was up against someone who wasn't falling for her lies. The fake tears, the dramatic stories, it wasn't working anymore. The battle between them turned into a game of chess. Maggie skipped meetings, Ms. Carson called home. Mom scheduled joint sessions, Maggie made herself throw up in the bathroom to avoid going. I honestly couldn't wait to see how far Maggie would take it. She was relentless, but I think she realized fighting back only made her look worse. The day she finally gave in, I secretly celebrated. It wasn't long before Ms. Carson suggested that Mom take Maggie to a psychologist. She explained how Maggie showed signs of an antisocial personality. As much as Mom had always been blind to Maggie's behavior, she couldn't deny it anymore. Maggie wasn't just difficult, she was dangerous. Mom was a wreck. She spent hours pacing the kitchen, crying, chain-smoking cigarettes. The psychologist recommended weekly sessions for Maggie, and sometimes Mom and I would join. It was oddly satisfying to see Maggie squirm in those sessions, the way she'd always made others feel. I played the part of the caring older brother, pretending to be supportive. It wasn't easy, especially with Maggie glaring at me the entire time. She refused to tell the truth, blaming everything on Dad instead. Mom shut that down fast, which the psychologist called progress. I wasn't so sure. After every session, Maggie would lock herself in her room for the night. But not before shooting me one last, sharp look from the stairs, a reminder that the war between us was far from over. I started keeping a knife under my pillow at night. Just in case. It felt a little crazy at first, but I'd remind myself not to underestimate Maggie. She'd always been willing to go further than anyone thought possible to get what she wanted. And lately, it felt like what she wanted was me dead. It was hard to tell if the therapy sessions were helping at all. The psychologist kept reassuring Mom that it would just take time. But Mom, in her desperation, made the worst mistake anyone could: she went online. She stayed up all night, spiraling through rabbit holes of shady advice, from miracle diets to treat personality disorders to articles claiming to identify serial killers in childhood. The whole thing was nuts, and it made Mom even more unhinged. Then she stumbled on Dr. McKinnon. He ran a small private practice down in Boston, a few hours away. His website described him as an expert in psychology, specializing in personality disorders. There was even a link to an article about how he'd helped the FBI catch the Bear River Killer. Apparently, he'd formed a relationship with the guy afterward and wrote a book about it, which, of course, he plugged on the site. Mom emailed him immediately, and he replied just as fast, promising he could help Maggie. Dr. McKinnon claimed to have invented some kind of device that could rewire the parts of Maggie's brain responsible for her behavior. The catch? It would cost a fortune. But Mom didn't hesitate. That weekend, she drove down to Boston, signed a stack of waivers, and scheduled the procedure for 6 weeks later, right after school let out for summer. She even booked a hotel for Maggie's recovery. Mom was all in. The only problem? Maggie wasn't going to just let this happen. When Mom told her, all hell broke loose. "Why would you do this to me?" Maggie yelled. "You really think there's something wrong with me?" "Yes, Maggie. Yes." It was heartbreaking to hear Mom say it, but Maggie had a way of cutting even deeper. She always knew the exact thing to say to hit you where it hurt most. "Well, you raised me," Maggie snapped. "I didn't raise you to act like this." Mom fired back. Maggie ignored her. "I want to transfer schools." "What? Why?" Mom asked, exasperated. "Everyone at my school thinks I'm crazy. Send me to St. John's." Mom shook her head. "I can't afford that, Maggie." "Then cancel the surgery." Mom's voice dropped. "It's either the surgery or I'll have you committed. Your choice." That shut Maggie up. She stormed off to her room, leaving Mom trembling in the kitchen. I stayed silent, awkwardly watching the scene from across the room. I felt bad for Mom, but I was proud of her for standing her ground. Still, I half expected Maggie to run away that night, or worse. I ended up barricading my bedroom door and gripping the knife under my pillow until I finally fell asleep. The days that followed were eerily calm. Maggie went to school, came home, did her homework, ate dinner, and went to bed. It was unsettling, and I told Ms. Carson as much during one of our sessions. I'd been meeting with her more often as the school year wound down. Of course, she couldn't discuss Maggie's sessions with me, but she was willing to share her thoughts. "She's a monster," I told her. "The world would be better off without her." The words came out of my mouth before I even realized it, and the worst part was, I meant them. Ms. Carson seemed just as taken aback as I was. "That's the problem," she said finally. "You've demonized her for so long that you've forgotten she's a person, too." My legs started bouncing, and I tapped my finger against the armrest. Ms. Carson leaned forward, her tone calm but firm. "I'm not saying your feelings aren't valid. What I am saying is that you might want to try understanding who Maggie really is. Right now, you see her as this tornado, destroying everything in her path for no reason. But I promise you, there's always a reason for what she does." "Like what?" I scoffed. "Control," she replied. "She needs to feel in control, not just of her life, but of everyone around her. And now, for the first time, she's losing that control. It's terrifying for her." I shook my head. "That's true for everyone. Nobody else acts like she does." Ms. Carson smiled sadly. "We're all just trying to figure out how to get through life. But not everyone is given the tools to do it properly." For a moment, her expression shifted, like she was holding something back. "Did something happen to her?" I asked. She didn't answer, just looked at me with that same sad expression. "What does she even want?" I pressed. "These are questions you need to ask her," Ms. Carson said gently. "You and Maggie are long overdue for a real conversation. And if this surgery happens, it's even more important that you try." She gave me a small smile. "Think about it." I didn't know if I was ready for that conversation with Maggie. If there was more to her, I'd never seen it. But Ms. Carson was right. I was so tired of being afraid of my sister. Tired of avoiding her at school, at home, everywhere. Tired of my entire life revolving around her. I just wanted to live like a normal teenager, with friends, girlfriends, birthdays, family parties, and sleep. None of that felt possible with Maggie in my life. As the last day of school ended and the eve of her surgery crept closer, I realized I couldn't keep putting it off. After an unusually silent dinner, I knocked on her bedroom door. "What?" she called out. I swallowed hard. "Can I come in?" There was a pause that felt like forever. My palms were sweating. "Go ahead," she finally said. I hadn't been in her room much since we were kids, and it looked almost exactly the same. Pink walls, old dolls gathering dust on a high shelf. Her closet doorframe still had our childhood heights etched into the wood, a tradition Papa used to keep up every time he visited. Maggie sat cross-legged on her bed with a book in her hands. From where I stood, she looked like any other normal teenage girl. My hand pulsed as I lingered in the doorway. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone flat. "I want to understand you," I said. She raised an eyebrow but didn't flinch. "I don't think you do." "I do. I want to know what it's like to be you. What you're thinking, why you do the things you do." "I don't know," she mumbled. "How do you not know?" "Because I don't understand myself either," she snapped, slamming her book shut and tossing it onto her desk. "You treat me like I'm some kind of experiment, and I don't appreciate it. You're about to have a chip put in your brain, Maggie." I shot back. She folded her arms, glaring at me. Talking to her always made me feel like I was the crazy one. I stepped farther into the room, picking up a framed photo from her dresser. It was an old picture of her as a little girl, grinning wide. I set it back down with a sharp thunk. "You hurt people," I said, meeting her eyes. "I know you know that. Do you ever feel bad about it?" "Of course I do." "Liar," I said. I think you hate people. I think you hate yourself. I think you're different, and that's why you do it. Am I wrong? Do you even love me? Do you love Mom? Or do you hate us too? She stepped closer, stopping just inches from my face. Her expression was oddly calm, almost pitying. I don't anything you, she said. I don't anything anyone. It was probably the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. At the time, it made my skin crawl. Later, I realized just how sad of an admission it was. Mom and Maggie left for Boston early that Friday morning. I didn't say goodbye. Despite my doubts about Dr. McKinnon's device, part of me hoped I'd finally get a new version of my sister. With the house to myself for the weekend, I mostly just slept. It felt like I was catching up on years of lost rest. When I was awake, I had no idea what to do with myself. I sat in silence, let the TV play to an empty room, paced, or just laid on the floor, crushed by the weight of my anxiety. I had to do something. Ms. Carson's words echoed in my mind, urging me to see Maggie for who she really was. So, I went into her room. I sat on her bed, nervously scanning the space. Clothes were scattered around, and for a moment, I worried she'd somehow know I'd been there. My eyes landed on that same framed photo from earlier. I picked it up again, staring at the little girl smiling back at me. Had she always been this way? Or had something turned her into the person she'd become? And if so, could she ever go back to being that smiling kid in the picture? I lay back on her bed, lost in thought. Who exactly was going to walk through the door when they came back? The question kept me up that night. After a few restless hours of sleep, I woke early and planted myself in the living room, in the same seat Papa always used to sit in. I stared at the front door, imagining the moment it would open. My mind wandered too far, picturing Maggie charging in to hug me and tell me she was sorry for everything. That's when it hit me, I couldn't remember us ever hugging. Not once. A hole in the wall nearby reminded me why that was. Maggie had this way of manipulating you, even when she wasn't there. The slam of car doors snapped me out of my thoughts, and my stomach sank. Moments later, the front door swung open, and they walked in as casually as if they'd just come back from the grocery store. "Oh, hi, hun." Mom beamed, dropping her bags to wrap me in a hug and kiss. Then she called over her shoulder, "Maggie, come say hi to your brother." I felt like I might throw up. I could barely bring myself to look at her. Maggie hovered by the door, looking bashful. "Hi," she said softly, rubbing her arm up and down like she was just as uncomfortable as I was. "Hi," I mumbled back, stealing a quick glance at her. There was a small patch of shaved hair near her temple, and I could see the end of stitches trailing down her scalp to her forehead. Her eyes looked different, calmer, maybe. Mom sighed at the awkward silence, heading into the kitchen and rummaging through the cabinets. "How about some breakfast? Anyone hungry? Can I take a shower first?" Maggie asked. "Of course, baby. Just be careful, you can't get your head wet yet, okay?" Maggie nodded and disappeared upstairs. Mom waited until she was gone, then hovered next to me as the smell of sizzling bacon filled the air. "They said it might take a while to kick in," she whispered, almost giddy. "But I think it's already working." I didn't respond. Her optimism didn't mean much to me yet. When she noticed the empty slot in the knife block, she frowned. "Have you seen the big knife?" she asked. I shook my head. I wasn't ready to put it back yet. Despite her excitement, I was going to need to see a lot more before I felt safe. For weeks, I didn't see much of Maggie. She spent most of her time asleep, which Mom said was a side effect. When she was awake, she was quiet at dinner, polite, even, but she didn't say much. I tried to enjoy my summer as best I could, shooting pucks in the driveway, biking to neighboring towns, catching a movie with a school friend. My deal with Mom was that I'd stay home during the day while she worked, just in case Maggie needed anything. I wasn't thrilled about being alone with her, but honestly, I hardly saw her. We exchanged quick greetings in the hallway and nothing more. Mom called often to check in, and for weeks, nothing happened. Then, one night, I shot awake to the sound of crashing and banging. Something was being thrown against the walls, over and over. I ran into the hallway and stopped outside Maggie's door, listening to the tantrum unfolding inside. Just as quickly as it started, it stopped. When I called Mom to tell her what had happened, she brushed it off. Dr. McKinnon said emotional outbursts are normal, she said. It's part of the process. Would have been nice if someone had warned me. After that, I couldn't relax. I thought I heard Maggie talking to herself through the walls, faint murmurs mixed with coughs and gasps, growing louder every day. One afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I stood outside her door, trying to make sense of the whispers. Then, I knocked. "Come in," she said, her voice small. I stepped inside. She was wrapped tightly in her sheets, only her face poking out, despite the stifling summer heat. I stood near the door, just like before. "Are you okay?" I asked, not really caring. Her face twisted in a way I'd never seen before, and she started to cry. Big, ugly sobs. For a split second, I felt good. Watching her suffer felt satisfying. The louder she cried, the better I felt. "What's wrong?" I asked, moving closer to her bed. "I don't like this," she choked out between sobs. "I don't like it. I don't like it." She reached for my hand, clutching it as she repeated the phrase over and over. I stood there, stunned. "It's okay," I lied, holding her hand and muttering fake reassurances. As I stood there, pretending to comfort her, I wondered if this was how she'd always felt when she saw people in pain. If it was, I didn't envy her. Later that night, Maggie knocked on my door. She slipped in without waiting for an answer, moving like a cat. She climbed onto my bed, sitting cross-legged in a hoodie and sweatpants, despite the sticky, muggy air. "Sorry about earlier," she said. "It's fine," I replied. "It's not fine." She stared at me with a strange intensity. "I know you hate me. You don't have to pretend you don't. And you're right, I hate myself too. I was jealous of everyone." I sat up straighter, my heart pounding as her words tumbled out. "You asked what it's like to be me," she continued bitterly. "It's like being a ghost. Floating around, lost. You don't remember who you are or what it's like to be alive. You just exist, and no one even notices you're there. And when they do, they're scared. They don't want you around. So you stay in the background and watch everyone else live their lives. And it's not fair. So you mess with them. For attention. Because you're bored. Beyond bored. Because for just 1 second, their screams make you feel like you're real. I've spent my whole life chasing the screams." I tried to process her words, my fingers brushing against the knife still hidden under my pillow. I shifted to hide it. "Wish you'd told me that a long time ago," I said softly. "It's not that I hate you, Maggie. I'm afraid of you." Her face scrunched up, and for a second, I thought she was going to cry again. But then she took a deep breath and smiled, like flipping a switch. "Can I throw you a birthday party?" she blurted out. I blinked, confused. My birthday was 2 months ago. "Can I do it anyway? I want to do something nice for you. Please." I didn't know what to think. Maggie was looking at me with wide, hopeful eyes, her hands clasped near her mouth like a kid begging for candy. I let out a heavy sigh. "Okay, fine." That afternoon, Mom took her shopping for decorations and a cake. When they came back, they kicked me out of the house so they could set everything up. It felt ridiculous. I wandered the neighborhood, stopping at a park to watch a Little League baseball game. I wasn't there for the game itself, I just needed to clear my head. Watching families cheer for their kids didn't exactly help, though. It only reminded me how fake my own family's happy moment at home felt. When I finally came back, I was amazed by what they'd done. The kitchen and living room were glowing with multicolored lights from lava lamps, strobe lights, and glow sticks scattered everywhere. A big "Happy Birthday" banner hung on the wall, and on the table beneath it sat a chocolate cake with vanilla frosting, already lit with a 16 candle. They started singing, but neither Mom nor Maggie could get through it without laughing. Maggie wouldn't stop, she laughed so hard she looked borderline crazy. We had some awkward small talk afterward, mostly Mom reminiscing about past birthday parties while conveniently skipping over the parts where Maggie had ruined them. After the cake, Maggie ran upstairs and came back with a small gift, neatly wrapped with a bow. She handed it to me silently. Inside was something I never expected to see again, Papa's medal. All those years I thought I'd lost it, and she'd had it the whole time. My emotions collided all at once, anger, relief, gratitude. Mom's face said it all, she was begging me with her eyes not to lose my temper. Maggie stood there, waiting nervously. I wanted to yell at her. Instead, I took the pin out of the box and held it in my hand. The rage melted away, replaced by a strange sense of peace. "Thanks," I said, meaning it. Before I could process what was happening, she lunged forward and hugged me, tight and silent. Mom had tears in her eyes, her hands covering her mouth. The rest of the night was spent eating more cake and playing card games. I couldn't stop watching Maggie, trying to catch her in an unguarded moment, looking for signs of the mask slipping. Anytime her smile faded or her lips twitched, I couldn't tell if it was because she knew I was watching or if it was more of the emotional fallout Mom had mentioned. That night, I heard her crying again. I'd been hearing it almost every night. At first, it was satisfying, but it had stopped feeling good. If this was real, if she was really in this much pain, it meant she'd been carrying it for a long time. But I couldn't let myself believe it entirely. I couldn't afford to. "What can I do to make it easier for you?" she asked one night as we sat on the front steps, the cool breeze brushing past us. "It doesn't matter," I said quietly. "I can't see you as anything other than the ghost," she finished for me. I nodded. We sat in silence, watching the stars blink into view. The next day, she dyed blonde streaks into her hair. As summer wore on, Maggie and I started spending more time together. We watched movies on the couch, had late-night conversations, and shared moments that felt normal. She followed me around constantly, like a puppy begging for attention. For all the questions I used to have for her, she seemed to have twice as many for me. Simple things, like my favorite food or who I'd had a crush on. She even apologized for not remembering things she should have known. But playing along was exhausting. One night, I decided to put her on the spot. "What's up with the crying?" I asked. We were in her room, half watching a movie. She paused it and stared at the floor for a long moment. "Every time I close my eyes," she said softly, "I see everything I've ever done." Her voice cracked, and she dropped her head. We sat at the foot of her bed, a bowl of popcorn between us. I didn't know what to say. Before I could think of anything, she pressed play again, as if trying to bury the moment. I reached for her hand. "If it's that bad, just knock on the wall. I'll come to you." She nodded quickly, her lips pressed together. I hoped I wouldn't have to follow through on that offer anytime soon. That night, she knocked. The slam of car doors jolted me awake from my thoughts. My cousin had invited me to our family's lake house for the last week of summer, and Mom wasn't thrilled about leaving Maggie home alone. But I assured her Maggie was fine now, even pulling a page from Maggie's playbook by guilt-tripping Mom about how I'd barely done anything fun all summer. It worked. I spent 5 days on jet skis, eating hot dogs, and watching fireworks. I told Jonathan everything, things Mom had warned me not to share. But after everything Maggie had put him through as kids, I figured he deserved to know. He was stunned. "You really think it worked?" he asked as we sat on the deck, overlooking the lake. I shrugged. "Seems like it." Jonathan glanced at his cat, Mila, perched on the railing nearby. "Sure it does," he said, petting her. The way he said it irritated me, but what really got under my skin was how protective I suddenly felt of Maggie. When the week ended, my aunt dropped me off at home. I might have invited her in, but Mom was at work, and I wasn't sure how often she'd been checking on Maggie. When I called to let her know I was back, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She'd either forgotten it or left it for Maggie, both equally likely. I went upstairs to check on Maggie, but her room was empty. I called for her, but no one answered. The house felt eerily quiet, except for a faint buzzing sound coming from the basement. I followed the noise to the locked basement door. "Mom? Maggie?" I called out, banging on the door. The buzzing continued, joined by a sharp, horrible scream. My heart pounded as my mom's phone started ringing on the counter again. I pounded on the door, shouting their names, my mind racing with terrible images. Had Maggie hurt Mom? Was this my fault for trusting her? I kicked at the doorknob over and over until the frame cracked, finally forcing the door open. I flew down the stairs, rounding the corner to see Maggie at Dad's old workbench. She was holding a power drill, the bit pressed against the scar on her head where the chip had been implanted. Blood spattered everywhere. Her eyes were wild and terrified as she looked up at me. "I want to go back," she screamed. "I want to go back." Maggie was rushed to the hospital. Thankfully, she hadn't drilled far, but they kept her for observation. When she was released, Mom took her straight back to Dr. McKinnon. He seemed almost impressed, spinning the incident as proof that the device was working. Mom wasn't impressed. She pleaded for a way to lessen the chip's effects, but all McKinnon could offer was medication. He repeated what he'd said before: Maggie needed time, not just to adjust to others but to come to terms with herself. He explained that she was feeling the weight of a lifetime of guilt and shame, and the best thing we could do was help her heal. And keep a closer eye on her. Back home, Mom found Maggie a new therapist and enrolled her at St. John's Prep after all. It drained what little savings we had left, but Mom was determined to give Maggie a fresh start. The medication seemed to help, too. Maggie grew calmer as summer wound down. I spent those last days of break in her room, partly to keep watch and partly out of a strange sense of duty. We weren't supposed to talk about the incident, but Maggie brought it up anyway. "How do you live with it?" she asked. "Live with what?" "The guilt," she said softly. It wasn't a question for me to answer, but for once, I felt like being the big brother I'd never really been. "You just have to learn from it," I said. "Be better today than you were yesterday." It wasn't much, but she still thanked me. "Do you love me?" she asked next. I hesitated. "Not yet. But I'd like to someday." She leaned in and hugged me tightly. "I'd like that too." On the first day of school, Mom and Maggie were up early, their thumping and rummaging waking me. St. John's started earlier than my school, so they were ready to leave before I even poured my cereal. Maggie stood by the door in her new uniform, waiting as Mom grabbed her keys from the table. "Have a good first day," Mom said to me. "Fresh start for all of us." She suddenly gasped, her eyes landing on the knife in the block behind me. "It was in the drawer," I said with a laugh. "Maybe a ghost borrowed it." I glanced at Maggie, who was already looking at me with a knowing smile. She seemed to shine brighter than ever. Mom wagged her finger at me. Don't joke about that. Your grandfather used to tell me ghost stories when I was little. I couldn't sleep for weeks. She kissed me on the cheek and headed out. Don't forget to lock the door, and wish your sister luck. Good luck. I called. Maggie's smile grew, her nose wrinkling in that familiar way. She waved and followed Mom out the door. In that moment, I felt genuinely happy for her, and for her new classmates, who had no idea who she used to be. None of it mattered anymore. Maggie was ready to live a normal life. And so was I.